Hello, everyone. Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are. Maria here from Lead 5050 with Ian Clark. Hi. Well, meet
Hi,
Ian.
Hi everyone. Hi, Maria. Thank you for joining. Thank you for having me.
Ian is the founder of Daylight Consulting. He helps through Daylight Consulting organizations thrive financially through difference. And he's all about helping companies create meaningful change. He is very versatile. He has, he's a psychologist, has a background in banking, and now he's helping, he's changing the world. He's making the world a better place, basically. He's a great ally in the cause of gender equality and gender equity. Sorry, we talked about that the other time. Remember the difference between equality and equity? And well, he is a humanist, a leadership consultant, DE&I consultant, and a friend, and a wonderful human being.
I like that. I like the last two best. There's so many labels. We love having labels, humans, but I really think that to get this right, we all have to be humanists, and you get this. You totally get this. It's such a pleasure having Lead 5050 as one of our strategic partners, because we acknowledge that we don't know everything, and I always wanted your help in helping me become better, and you've done that. So thank you for all you do for women and for men as well, by helping us see the value of women. And I'm so excited to participate in this conversation all about women and war. It's such an interesting and topical conversation too.
Thank you, Ian. Could you tell us a bit more about what you do at Daylight?
So we're a relatively new firm. It's going to be our 1-year birthday next month. I'm so excited. We're going to have a cake with a candle on it, which is much better than when I get a cake. But it's we exist to help any progressive firm that wants to make mistakes but keep promises, thrive financially through differences. You've so beautifully put it. And we offer research. We do assessments and advisory services, training and coaching, and speakers and experts. Each one of those things, like any human being, is an important piece in the cog. But when we put them all together and you create one big, giant, beautiful puzzle, a masterpiece, it is a toolkit for change. And that's what we do. We help companies transform their cultures and turbocharge their performance.
Thank you, Ian. We were talking, we've talked so much about whether women are less or more likely to go to war than men. And let's expand this conversation and share it with our audience. So, Ian, what do you think? Are women less likely to go to war?
So let's backtrack to before I know what I know, because I first asked myself this question because Boris Johnson, when he was still Prime Minister of the UK at the NATO Security Summit in July, said very openly, I think if there's a woman in charge of Russia, then she wouldn't have gone to war. And it annoyed me. And I'm not sure why it annoyed me at the time, but I thought, I wonder if that's true, because that does seem like a logical conclusion, right? Women are fluffy and caregiving and nurturing and emotional and empathetic and all those lovely, warm words that don't belong in the boardroom. So I started to research into this and try to find what studies I could find on the topic. And I really surprised myself what I learned. So hopefully we can share that with the audience today. But what about you? What was your journey on this question?
Yeah, so as we first talked about it, Ian, I thought, well, yes, women are less likely to go to war because there's something biological about it, right? We have different hormones, we have less testosterone, we give life because we give birth to children. So there must be a natural link between women wanted to solve problems through talking, collaborating, cooperating. So yeah, women are less likely to go to war. And it's only when they try to adopt a to adapt to the masculine leadership paradigm, that they lose that. They lose that, such soft feminine traits. But then I also started reading the articles and the links you sent me, and I thought, hang on, am I falling into that trap? Is it because this is all just acquired? It is something societal and cultural, and these feminine and masculine values are just a construction, the same as gender. So I have come to believe this because I was taught to think like that feminine means being collaborative, cooperative, soft, all those traits, and masculine is being more aggressive, tougher, how can I say, those hard, tough traits. Yeah, so I started questioning that. And I don't know anymore. I'm confused.
What's real and what's not? I think that's such a natural reaction when we go through a journey where we're challenging the things that we've always been brought up to believe. And then you start to look into them and you find out so much of the world is artificial. I remember the first time I was told that Santa, apologies if anyone doesn't know this who's listening, but told that Santa wasn't real and the Easter Bunny is not real. Excuse me, what? And the Tooth Fairy as well? It's like, well, where do we stop? What about God and Jesus? How do I know what you're telling me is real? The best way to find out is to practice. It's human curiosity. It's one of our best instincts, and it is an instinct to check and understand the world around us. And so few of us seem to be practicing it because we believe what we're told, and we feel that there's no need to be curious. But you and I are different. So one of the first times I noticed this was when I used to have a type. You have a type when you're looking for like going on a date. Do you have a type?
No.
You don't have a type? I love that answer. No, because you're open-minded and you realize that a type. So types when
a type, of course. Yeah, I understand. Yeah.
Yeah. I thought I had a type, blonde hair, blue eyes, must be. That's what everyone says is really attractive. And then after a while, I started to think, I don't think that is my type. I think actually I don't really have a type. I've just been conditioned to think of what beauty is. So I think the same thing you were saying about women in war, we need to understand cause and effect here. Are we being attracted to blonde hair, blue eyes because we're attracted to them, they're attractive, or is that actually the effect? Is the cause actually what we're being told? Same thing with women in war. I think that women are just as likely to go to war as men, and any propensity for either or behavior is probably a reaction to some of the labels and the rhetoric that we are putting out there today in terms of our stereotypes over men and women.
You said something that really made me think. You said something quite provocative. I found that thinking that women are by nature more peaceful than men is not only factually incorrect, but also a form of oppression. Yeah.
Got it. And this
could you elaborate on that? Because that was really interesting.
So this actually, I love this point because we were talking about it at Daylight, and I was annoyed. I actually, and I don't often get annoyed, but I was annoyed at the suggestion that women who would be in charge of their own country, with all of the patriotism and obligation and responsibility that entails, would be reduced to this idea that because they were women, they would be unable to defend that country if necessary. That was an annoying conclusion for them. And it was a unit from our marketing team who actually finished the sentence for me. She said, "Well, you're annoyed because it's a form of oppression." And by implying that women are meeker and milder and more peaceful, we're actually undermining the case for them to be in the boardroom because we're suggesting that they don't have the ability to make tough decisions. And it was a real aha moment for me. And it just shows to me the beauty of having different perspectives around here, because she was tapping into how I was feeling, but she was able to articulate it so much better than I was because of her own perspective and experiences around it. It's a form of oppression.
Well, but maybe we are associating here toughness with leadership, right? So why does a leader have to be tough and, oh
Why can't
God,
they be smiling, listening leaders? I remember the last time I came on and you said that, and I loved that phrase the first time. You heard it here first, folks, on Lead 50/50. Why can't leaders be smiling, listening leaders? And I think I read this as well in your own story, which I love. I always love hearing it from you. But that was one of the reasons you left big business, Maria, because you were a smiling, listening leader, and you were surrounded by toxic masculine leaders that was selling toxic masculinity as the only leadership paradigm that's valid.
yeah.
And I
Well,
totally agree with you. It's not.
yeah, that's not 100% my personal story, but I've seen it many times, and I've tried to. I'm not going to say I'm trying to. I've tried to adapt to the toxic leadership paradigm, but I've tried to be a bit more masculine, of course. So I'm taking more seriously, and that has happened to many people, to many women, and to many men. And at the end, it's probably all about authenticity, isn't it? That you're allowed to be yourself, that you can be yourself, right?
And I think this authenticity. I'm so glad you mentioned that, because this is really what it comes down to when we're talking women and war. Human identity at its most fundamental level drives our behavior, but our behavior drives our identity. The best way for me to explain that and it's a causality loop, actually. The best way for me to explain it is if there's a fire and we need someone to put the fires out, we call a group of people firemen or firewomen or fireperson, and they will then run towards the fire. They will suppress their instinct and they will behave differently in order to adjust to the identity that you've given them. But if a fireman runs from a fire, you will then say, well, they're no longer a fireman because they're cowards and they should have stayed, but instead they ran. So in that case, that person didn't believe that they were good enough to be a fireman and they ran. So the moral to that story is identity and behavior are intertwined. If you tell women that they are not strong enough to defend their country and go to war, then fewer of them will aspire to political office. It's the same as if you say to a woman's place is in the home, as someone did hundreds of years ago. And unfortunately, it's taken us hundreds of years to dispel that myth, because it has created a lasting subservience to women's identity and sense of their place in the world. These things are illusions. Women are just as capable of being powerful, tough leaders. We've seen this. Angela Merkel, Margaret Thatcher, the list goes on. But the only reason we see less women in the world going to war is because there's very few of them in political office. Just 21 leaders in the world are female versus 180, I think, men.
Which brings us to the observer bias you mentioned. Because you told me maybe we see less women going to war because there are just less women leaders. So
It's actually a study, and it's a study that I found when I was trying to research this from the National Bureau of Economics in 2017. They looked at all of the wars that took place between 1480 and 1913, and then they looked, and this is specifically in Europe, so we're not talking sort of Asia, Far East, or the Americas, but they looked at the gender of the kings and queens broadly who were going to war. They found that women were 27% more likely than kings to go to war during that time. That's almost 500 years of data. Incredible. By observer bias, as you say, we are seeing the numbers when we're saying there's no difference between men and women, it would seem that we're wrong. Women are more warlike than men.
Could you explain a bit more about observer bias? Because there are so many biases. What does it really mean? What's the observer bias?
So my favorite observer bias is in astrophysics. And the observer bias is that we are here on Earth and we exist. Therefore, there must be loads of other planets full of people who exist because we're on one. But if we were out there in the cold deadness of the universe and we didn't know exactly where to look to find Earth, we might conclude that life isn't possible because we can't see anywhere else. Observer bias is where your results are biased because the input is biased. You are seeing more of one side of the story than the other, and it happens a lot as in the case of here, whether women go to war or not. We think women don't go to war very much because there aren't any massive armies on the border of Europe currently trying to invade one of its countries that are run by women, because there aren't massive armies controlled by women anywhere in the world today. If there were, we would see women waging plenty of wars.
Fascinating. So, Ian, would you agree that we all have masculine and feminine traits, and that society pushes us to be more like this or like that, depending on how we were born? So what's your take on that?
I love that question. And this is a live question that I ask myself constantly. So I am an alpha male. I am well and truly a leader. I'm someone that people follow. I'm someone that innovates ideas, and I break world records, and I found companies, and I do alpha male stuff, right? But that's not what alpha males think is alpha male. Alpha males think that I should be aggressive and rude and spiteful and tribalistic and nepotism, and all that, and I should only surround myself by people that look like a mirror image of myself to boost my ego. I think that being masculine is all about succeeding and winning hearts and minds, and therefore building confidence instead of ego. And I actually think that those things are just as much feminine traits as well. I think masculinity and femininity probably don't exist. I think what you're saying is that there's a bit of masculine and femininity in all of us, which is probably more a gender spectrum. I think gender is probably a spectrum, and actually there's a male and a female ends of the spectrum, and we're probably all falling somewhere along the way of that. So although maybe I don't present as particularly feminine, I am exhibiting some of the traits that you may more attribute to female traits.
So I'll clarify. Yeah, I meant, for me, there's male and female, which is the biological stuff, and there's the masculine and feminine, which is what I understand as cultural, feminine and masculine.
I know you get this.
I mean, in the sense of Gerd Hofstede.
And you're right. You're right. There is a cultural spectrum of masculine and femininity, and of course, because we've created it, it exists, just like Santa and the Tooth Fairy. So if some people, Santa came down the chimney, some people didn't have a chimney, so he came in through the front door or a window. And I think the masculine and feminine spectrum is a bit like that. In that it doesn't really exist, but we've made it exist. So if you're going to attribute the toxic masculine traits on one end and the ultra feminine subservience and that belonging in the house to the female end, then that is a construct that we can work within for the base of this call. And I'm probably more towards the masculine end without intending to be. Yeah, but in some ways not.
It's fascinating. Let's do an experiment.
Yes,
I'll tell you I'll say a couple of adjectives, and you tell me the first that comes to your mind, okay? You tell masculine or feminine. So let's do it. So, tough.
Masculine.
Collaborative.
Feminine.
Cooperative.
Feminine. We love this game.
Soft.
Feminine.
Nurturing.
Okay, so if you're proving a point, you're proving that I'm feminine.
No, I'm not proving anything. No, that is what most
Yeah, I mean, it's a very well demonstrated point, because I was thinking about myself as masculine, but actually on this scale, I'm feminine, and that's excellent primary research. Actually.
No, we were just taking the masculine and the feminine values. So you think the same as Gerd Hofstede and as myself and as most people I know. Yeah. So we are conditioned to think that nurturing, soft, cooperative, collaborative, did I say nurturing, caring, all of that are feminine values, the culturally constructed feminine values, and tough, decisive, determined, authoritative. Those are masculine values.
Why have we decided that aggression and toughness and spitefulness and all that belong on the leadership spectrum? It's such a shame. I do wish that we hadn't. And once you start to get people, sorry, go on.
Because we are living, because the leadership paradigm is still a masculine one, in which to be considered a leader, a good leader, you are supposed to be decisive, determined, tough, all of those things, which is considered to be masculine. Also, competitiveness, that's masculine. And by that, I don't mean male, I mean masculine, cultural construction. So, and there are masculine and feminine cultures, right? I mean, you and I, you in the UK, I in Germany, we live in quite masculine cultures. And yeah, anyway, it's culturally constructed, and you were right, I think. So that's what made me feel, sorry, go on.
So I was going to say, so I spent 14 years in banking, which is probably one of the most toxic masculine industries that you can find yourself in. And what I saw there, most of my friends are white heterosexual men in real life, and they aren't ultras, they aren't they aren't rich and wealthy people. They're by and large millennials who are trying to work their way up the professional ladder, intelligent, highly qualified, but nonetheless still trying to meet ends meet and getting their first mortgages. And so, and I'm often wondering, I was often wondering and talking to them about, well, why haven't you become these, ultra successful investment bankers that I was surrounded by? And the answer to that is that within the corporate environment I was in, there was these good heterosexual white men that but also believed in the same things that you and I do, that it's toxic masculinity doesn't belong in the boardroom and that you need to be collegiate and listening. And unfortunately, they time and time again were ejected from the business, as was I ultimately last year, by this toxic masculine paradigm that only values tribalism. Tribalism is a very strong instinct within people that serves very well for the 98% of our existence that we lived in caves, where tribalism protected us from invaders who would come and steal our food and wives and all that. So the reason we have that instinct is there, but it doesn't work in an interconnected world. And that tribalism ultimately led to the ejection of anyone that wasn't exhibiting that tribalistic defense. And it has led to an overpopulation of big businesses by largely cavemen, actually, who really just want everything for themselves and are marauding. It's a very colonial approach, actually. And by hoarding wealth and opportunity and ejecting anyone that challenges them, they are self-reinforcing a leadership paradigm built on toxic masculinity, not on true leadership.
Sorry, is it loud here? That's my...
Hello, we've got a special guest, everyone.
But he is laughing and running around. Yeah. So we haven't answered the question if women are less likely to go to war or not. And I don't know what the truth is, Ian.
Well, so there are many examples from history. If you look at Queen Boadicea, who tried to repel the invading Roman army from the UK, that was heavily influenced by a puppet government in Queen Cleopatra from Egypt as well. If we look towards Indira Gandhi, who led the Indo-Pakistani War in 1971 that led to the independence of Bangladesh, again, a war led by a woman, a very powerful woman, and a successful one at that. These women are, I didn't get me started on Bloody Mary, and there are many examples of women that are not shrinking violets in history. We just need to look. I think where women are being more successful, this 27% more likely to go to war, they're also more likely to win more land. In this study found that women were more successful in war. They were able to be more victorious more times than men. And it was coming from a place of still these feminine traits. There was a lot of collegiateness to women. They were more likely to ask friends to lend their armies to reinforce their own. They were more likely to trust their husbands to stay home and lead the nation whilst they went off and led battles. They were more likely to spend more time analyzing the strategy of their enemy to come up with countermeasures, whereas men are more gung-ho, more self-confident, more overconfident, tended to lose out because of those ultra-toxic masculine traits.
Oh, so again, collaboration and cooperation, right?
Yes, it's key to women's success.
Yeah. Okay.
But not all women collaborate. Not all women are cooperative. Not all men are toxic masculine. Hopefully, I'm trying to show that here. And I think that there is probably in any boardroom or in any invasion of another country a room for women and men who exhibit both traits and faculties from either side, because that's when you have a completeness of perspective that will allow you success to predict outcomes.
Yes, diversity, diverse leadership teams. Yeah, and the answer to all of this probably is, as you mentioned, curiosity. Just looking into, gaining insights, being curious, listening, observing, right? Which is why we created the Lead 50/50 accreditation, to help companies with that, see what's going on there, what their employees want, what they really think.
I love what you've done, because none of us were in this industry, 5, 6, 7 years ago. This did not exist as a priority for companies. And we've all given up our life goals and our plans to come and do this, because we realized that we have unique and special skills that those corporates don't by and large possess, because they've filled themselves with ubiquity in the case of the big companies. And in the case of the smaller companies, they just don't have the scale to possess someone with your expertise or my expertise. So they can borrow our perspectives and our expertise by parachuting us in, and in your case, doing the Lead 50/50 accreditation, which will allow them to unlock all the expertise of one of the world's leading equality think tanks, to assess the various dynamics of affecting women and their rights and opportunity within those organizations, and coming up with real, manageable, implementable, deployable suggestions for how to become better. I think it's a great, I think what you've done is amazing. And I'm hoping that we can leverage that expertise as our strategic partners for gender equality forevermore.
Oh, thank you, Ian. And Ella is right. You really have a way with words. I love what you just said.
It's realness.
Thank you, Ian. It's been a pleasure.
Don't start any wars against daylight consulting, however, Lead 50/50. It's very important that we don't have to go up against you. There's more of you than us.
No, this is to be continued for sure. I could spend hours talking about it with you. Yeah.
That feeling is mutual. Thank you for having me on. Always a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, Anne. Bye, everyone.
Goodbye, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Bye.
Happy Friday.